for being with us today and for taking the time and coming to Egypt at this very critical moment in the U.S. We all know that there are elections ongoing very fiercely, very competitively, and let me also thank very much the embassy for contacting us, the center of the Prince Alwaleed Center for American Studies and Research, contacting us to tell us about the coming of Dr. Lublin and whether we would be interested. I certainly jumped on the occasion and said we certainly would be very interested in hearing the view of Professor Lublin and an expert on the elections and on the very interesting topic regarding the impact of the media on the U.S. presidential elections. And certainly we will have questions. I myself am very intrigued about the and we certainly will have much more to hear from him. We have also on the panel Dr. Hafez Mirazi, who is also very well informed and follow very closely Egypt-US relations in general, and notably certainly these timing the ongoing elections. Let me very briefly say a very brief word on both of them, on their CV, for you to have a quick background, and our panelists as well as our discussant who will talk to us today. Professor David Lublin is the recipient of 2 grants from the National Science Foundation and grants and a fellowship from the German Marshall Fund. He wrote and published a number of books, very impressive: The Minority Rules, Electoral Systems, Decentralization, and Ethno-Regional Parties. And certainly we know how now the change in the demography in the U.S. impacts on the elections, the paradox of representation, racial gerrymandering, and minority interests in Congress. And here I must ask you about what the meaning of gerrymandering. I tried to Google it. I didn't find it. So maybe you could tell me, maybe in private then later. The Republic, and the third book, The Republican South, Democratization and Partisan Change. He also certainly is very active in publishing articles and in variety of journals. Dr. Hafez al-Mirazi is a professor of practice at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication here at the American University at the AAC, and those who are following journalism certainly would know very well Professor Hafez al-Mirazi. He currently presents the weekly news program بتوقيت القاهرة, Cairo time, on the Egyptian satellite channel Dream 2 TV. So if you don't watch it, you better do that from now on. You no longer do it. Al-Mirazi has more than 30 years of experience working in both American and Arab broadcast television and radio. From 2010 to February 2011, he hosted the talk show Studio Cairo on Al Arabiya channel and covered the daily events of the January 25th revolution until the toppling of the Mubarak regime. Prior to returning to Egypt, Al-Mirazi spent 24 years living in and working in Washington, D.C. He served as Al Jazeera U.S. Bureau Chief and hosted the channel's widely viewed weekly news program from Washington. Al-Mirazi covered major news events, including Middle East peace talks, presidential election campaigns, and the events of 9/11 and the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Without further ado, let me give the floor to Professor David Lublin, maybe for 20 minutes or half an hour. What do you think? 20, so that you have 10 minutes for Hafez Mirazi or 15 minutes, and then open the floor for questions.
It's dangerous to let a professor talk as long as he wants to. First, let me say I'm very honored to be here at the American University in Cairo, if only because my university is also called American University in Washington, D.C. It was a long trip to come home, you could say. I should also mention that while the embassy was very kind to bring me here on my first trip to Egypt, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to visit your country and to meet Egyptians, that I do not work for the U.S. government. I don't represent the U.S. government. If you want to know what the U.S. government thinks, ask the nice diplomats at the U.S. Embassy. But I am fortunately a professor, so my words are just my own. Today I'm very happy to talk to you about our elections in the United States, which occur every 4 years. And as you know, we have a very fierce and long campaign for the office of president. I should mention briefly that this is not the only office being elected. We will also renew our federal Congress. Many states will elect governors as well as their state legislatures. And so this is only one election, though obviously a very big and important one. And the person who wins gets the nice helicopter and the big White House on Pennsylvania Avenue with the famous Oval Office. Is there by any chance a mic I could hold so I could? To be a talk show host, and this is my opportunity to the closest I will ever get to being Oprah Winfrey, who's, I don't know if she's known here, famous talk show host. So, as I'm sure you're aware, the two major candidates are Donald Trump for the Republicans and Hillary Clinton for the Democrats. They run on what we call a ticket with their vice presidential nominees. In the U.S. system, the presidential nominee, once he or she wins their party's nomination, picks that person. Mike Pence is the governor of Indiana. Tim Kaine is the former governor of Virginia and currently a senator. The donkey is the longtime symbol of the Democrats, and the elephant is the symbol of the Republicans for a very long time. Okay. We have third-party candidates who are getting a little more attention than usual this year. Gary Johnson is for the Libertarian Party and doing relatively well. He's getting somewhere around 8–9% of the vote in the polls. The Green Party has Jill Stein, who's more at 3 or 4%. She's more of a left-wing candidate. We will skip the Electoral College so we can go to, we're going to go straight to media. Let's see. What I want to focus on today a bit is both how does the media decide what to cover, and how do the candidates then use the knowledge of what the media likes to cover in order to manipulate the media. Okay, because it's sort of in many ways a dialogue, because the media in the US plays a key role in setting the agenda for the election. Because after all, when it comes to the candidates, they could discuss any number of aspects about the candidates, right? I mean, there's only a very limited time on any television program, and so they have to sort of pick and choose, and even newspapers, which also have to pick and choose. And so they play a big role in setting the agenda for the election and what we focus on. And so I wanted to talk a bit first about how the sort of general public, the television and newspaper media, or mass media decide that. And then I also want to talk a bit about social media, which plays an increasingly large role as well. Okay? So in terms of deciding what to talk about, what does the media like to cover? Okay? And the first thing is they love bad news. Okay? If it's negative and controversial, they will talk about it. Okay? You know, I was looking around, say, for example, Tahrir Square yesterday, and let's imagine you have a great day in Tahrir Square and there are no traffic accidents. Okay? Somehow I don't think you ever did a news story in front of the traffic circle and said, great day here in Tahrir Square, no traffic accidents. Okay? But if there's a huge traffic accident and 20 people die, then you might come.
It's the opposite here.
It's the opposite here, okay. Maybe it's more of a miracle. But, so when candidates do make mistakes, and when they do bad things, they like to cover it, okay? And when they talk about controversial things, okay? The other thing that the media, so that's the first point, the negative and the controversial. Okay, and sometimes the controversial isn't even that controversial. The media can make a controversy out of something. Okay? We once had a vice presidential candidate who, when he went to a school, he misspelled a word in English. Okay, he was supposed to spell the word potato. Okay, and potato in English ends with an O. And the vice president of the United States said to the child said, like, so is that it? And the kid says, yes, I think that's right. And the vice president says, no, just a little bit more. And so he thought there was an E on the end of potato. And so this became a national controversy, like, is the vice president stupid? Is he, okay, is he uneducated? But when you think about it, you know, it's whether or not he can spell of national importance, I don't know. But they really enjoyed that one. So the negative and the controversial, and I think we've seen lots of negative and controversial, and I'll get to some examples from this campaign. The second is they like to focus on strategy. Okay? So if Hillary Clinton goes out and gives a speech on education, okay, the media could just cover, okay, what is her education proposal? They will not do that. What they will do is instead tell us, why is she talking about education now? What advantage does she hope to get from talking about education? Is she trying to reach out to millennials and college students by talking about education? Okay? And did she talk about it in North Carolina because that's a swing state rather than in Maryland because it's not a swing state? Okay? In other words, they try and find all the motivations, and they always suspect a political motivation. Okay? Related to that, they like to cover what we call the horse race, okay? Which means sort of like polling. Who is ahead? Who is behind? And when you think about polling, in many ways, I mean, I love polls. I read all of them. I'm a complete addict. Okay? I need help. Maybe you can take me to a clinic and I can stop looking at polls for a week. I don't know. But, you know, polls are a very strange thing because if you think about it, so the New York Times pays to have a poll of the election, and then they report on the poll. So the newspaper has done something and then reported on what they did. Okay, and you know, I always thought journalists are supposed to report on what other people do, not what journalists do. So in some ways, they're very obsessed with who's ahead and who's behind. Okay?
So the opposite here.
Okay. No. Definitely not an expert on Egypt, so no worries there. The third thing they like to focus on is what I would call new and clear-cut items. Okay? Which is why they call it news and not olds. Okay? Okay. So when someone does something new and exciting, it becomes news. Okay? When you do the same thing again, okay, it's not news. So maybe, you know, Donald Trump declared that President Obama was born in America yesterday. I don't know if that was news or not, but it was news that he said it. Okay? If he does it again tomorrow, maybe there'll be some coverage as to why did he not think we heard him the first time. If he does it the third day, no one will talk about it. So you have to talk about something new in order to be covered. Okay? The media also has a preference for what we call clear-cut issues that are easy to explain, where there's sort of a yes option and a no option. Okay? So like, do you like Vladimir Putin or do you not like Vladimir Putin? Okay? Or in other words, like, you know, when we think about foreign policy, our relationship with Russia might be complicated. Okay? Like maybe we want to work with them on some things, but we're critical of them on other things. They like simple. Okay? So for example, when they talk about foreign trade, which is an incredibly complicated issue, they never like to actually talk about the details so much as are you for it or are you against it? Okay? Not, you know, what is the composition of the trade deal? Okay? Because that's boring and complicated, and I can already see you're getting sleepy with me just mentioning it, so I'll move on. Okay? So they like clear-cut new things. Okay? And so now the presidential candidates know this, and they tend to try and manipulate the media by taking advantage of these biases. Okay? And notice when I talk about the biases, I'm not saying so much that they have a pro-democratic or a pro-republican bias. They have a bias towards reporting certain types of things. Okay? I want to talk a little bit more about social media for a minute. Facebook is very big in terms of it's a great way to get people to spread out your message. So lots of people like one or both of the candidates and then they see what they say. But more importantly, it's also a great way for the candidates to build support more directly. Okay? Because let's imagine you see a campaign advertisement on television for Donald Trump. Okay? And you watch it and go, okay, but let's imagine, you know, let's imagine I'm your very good friend. Okay? You've known me for years, you like me, you respect my opinion. Well, we'll just imagine that, okay? You know, if you see like on Facebook that I post, oh, look at this cool Donald Trump video, or I like Donald Trump, you're more likely to believe it, okay? Because it's much better to get a recommendation from a friend than from, you know, nobody, okay? And so people like having local validation. Okay, so when I ran for local office in my town, one way I got support was we circulated a letter with lots of signatures from neighbors so that even people who didn't know me might say, oh, I know Bridget. Bridget's great. I like what she thinks, so I'll vote for David. Okay. Okay. Twitter has become a big thing. Okay? So the tweets have become so controversial, I almost hesitated putting them in these slides, and then I realized they call it social media for a reason, and that you all are younger than me and therefore know about Twitter. Okay? And probably know about other things. Like I had a student explain Instagram to me the other day, so I finally got, I mean, I knew what it was, but I was curious, like, how do you use this exactly? So, and Donald Trump has been particularly freewheeling in his tweets. Okay, you can see he's you know, you can tell for, I guess on the positive side, you can view his tweets as it's a great example of, boy, you can say anything in America. Okay, the First Amendment to our Constitution protects free speech, and the Supreme Court rules that in particular it protects political speech. Okay. Which is great, because I've been fortunate enough to do a number of these events, and I've been able to even criticize my own president in the embassy of my own country, which I think is pretty fantastic. Okay, so here you have Donald Trump saying, you know, President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States. Okay? On the scale of Trump tweets, that's almost nice. Okay? And he likes to refer to Hillary Clinton as Crooked Hillary. Okay? And what's interesting is about Twitter is Twitter, since you can only type 140 characters, is not very useful for complex, nuanced statements, right? You can't flesh out a policy position. So he tends to make very declarative statements like, manufacturing jobs have moved to Mexico and other countries. That will end when I win. Okay? Which, okay, great, you'll save manufacturing jobs in the US, but notice there's no explanation of how that is going to magically happen, right? Okay? It's just this will happen. Okay? He loves to attack the media and anyone who disagrees with him, and he loves to call them losers. So like the New York Times, he didn't like their story, so he calls the failing New York Times is a joke. CNN is laughable. Okay? One of Donald Trump's biggest strengths has been his ability to attract attention on Twitter. And remember when I was talking about people like to cover the negative and controversial. Okay? These are some of the less controversial tweets I could find to show you. Okay? So imagine what the other ones say, or you don't have to imagine. You can go to @RealDonaldTrump and read for yourself. And so his ability to dominate Twitter has been a real advantage, okay? Because he's able to help drive the media cycle by getting attention through new statements, okay? And negative and controversial. Now the downside to this has been, remember how is that another key bias of the media is that in order to get attention, he says something outrageous, okay? But in order to get more attention, you have to be more outrageous. Okay? And the problem with being more and more outrageous is you start to alienate people. Okay? And so while Mr. Trump has done amazingly well, in my view, he also seems to have a limit on his support. Okay? You may have heard recently the polls have been tightening between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. What isn't mentioned so much is this does not reflect that Donald Trump has become more popular. Donald Trump's support seems to lie in a narrow band between 39% and about 43%. Okay? And, he could say or do anything and he would probably have about 40% support. But he seems unable to rise above the maximum. Okay? And that the tightness is now driven by Hillary Clinton has been getting a lot of bad press, and so she has gone down. And so far, she has been more or less in a band of, I'd say, about 43 to 50%. 43 to 49% maybe. So when she goes up, she has a big lead. When she goes down, it tightens. Okay, but the movement has been much more about what people think about Hillary Clinton than what people think about Donald Trump. Because people at this point have pretty fixed opinions on Donald Trump. Okay? The other downside to him on Twitter is a lot of his sort of dominance on Twitter is he wants to be what we call the alpha male. Okay? The dominant, I'm in charge guy. The guy who stands like this. I'm tough. You don't want to argue with me. I guess I'm not convincing of that. But certainly not to my students, but I guess I should talk to my therapist, not you, about this. But in any case, part of the problem with that is that he's easily baited. Okay? So if you argue with him, he will argue back, and this has gotten him into huge trouble. The biggest example of this was his fights with, I think I have a picture of them somewhere here. With CASAR and Ghazala Khan. Okay? They spoke at the Democratic Convention, or I should say CASAR Khan spoke, Ghazala Khan was there, and CASAR Khan spoke passionately for Hillary Clinton. They're the parents of a young man who died in a war for the United States. Okay? And so, as parents of someone who died for our country, they are very naturally admired and respected people. Okay? They also happen to be Muslim people. Okay? Now, Donald Trump, And he gave one of the great speeches of the convention. He got tons of media attention, and he got the most attention when he had a copy of our Constitution in his pocket, and he pulled it out and said, "Donald Trump doesn't know our Constitution. I would be happy to lend him my copy." Okay? And that got a lot of attention. Donald Trump immediately started attacking them, okay? Which was the stupidest thing he could have done, okay? And the reason it was stupid is, you know, attacking the parents of a son who died for the country, who were very patriotic people, doesn't make you look good. They were also the most all-American, perfect stereotypes you can imagine, beyond having, you know, being the parents of a man who enlisted voluntarily in our armed forces and died for the United States. They continue to attend the funerals of other soldiers who died for the country. They host regular barbecues and 4th of July picnics for people who are graduating from military training nearby. You know, they're very good, nice people. So Donald Trump, you know, immediately attacked them. He implied first that Ghazala Khan, maybe she wasn't allowed to speak, and, you know, the implication being that she's a Muslim woman, so she's being suppressed. Okay, and this did not help also because the reason she didn't speak was, first of all, I think her husband was speaking, and secondly, not because, you know, she didn't necessarily want to speak. Also, she was overcome with grief because they were showing a huge picture of her son who had died only a few months ago. Okay? And I think many people can imagine her being overwhelmed as a result. And in fact, after Donald Trump said that, she spoke very eloquently on several television programs, she wrote several columns, and he just kept attacking him. Okay? And this is when Hillary Clinton got her biggest lead in the polls. Okay? It was probably due to CASAR and Ghazala Khan. Okay? You know, so his ability to dominate Twitter and attract the news has been an advantage, but it also can be a disadvantage because it means you can bait him into talking about things that maybe aren't advantageous. Okay. What else I want to go with? Okay, so Hillary Clinton has attempted to fight back on Twitter. Hillary Clinton will never be as interesting on Twitter as Donald Trump. Okay, and maybe we should be grateful for this. Okay, okay, but she's tried to fight back, and you can see she's had this big picture of Donald Trump as a loudmouth. She's pointing out like this Republican paper that never endorses Democrats has endorsed her for president. She's mocking what Trump said about ISIS, that he says he knows more about ISIS than the generals do. Okay. But I would say in terms of Twitter, Donald Trump wins Twitter. Okay. Another big thing in social media are internet memes. Okay. We all joke in the US the most popular ones seem to be of cats doing interesting things. Okay. Because we have nothing better to do at work than to watch cats. In fact, I think there was one with cats with their head in bread for a while. It was a thing. Okay. Someone started a big one with Hillary Clinton, particularly with this picture. Someone caught a picture of her looking really badass in these sunglasses, like looking on her phone. Okay. And so they started a whole series of like fake conversations, imagining what she was replying back to. Okay. And so like this one's mocking about like, you know, there's a famous question like if it's 3 a.m., who do you trust to handle, you know, the international crisis? And so here is like this is one of her aides saying it's 3 a.m. and I think something's happening. She was on it. You know, that she's a strong, tough woman. And there's a lot of ones that are sort of like mocking her or showing her dissing or making fun of other people when they tweet her and when they reply to her. And so, you know, Donald Trump also has tried to, you know, had a lot of memes about him. Here he's, you know, saying, I'm not even president and I'm already creating jobs. Okay? because people are being paid to protest me. They use their web pages. Their web pages are used less as a means to disseminate ideas and more to attract volunteers and money. Okay? So, and this is where Hillary Clinton wins, because Donald Trump has a pretty weak website. Hillary Clinton has all these ways you can volunteer, including, you can call undecided voters on your cell phone and try and convince them to vote for Hillary Clinton. And then you can report back on the internet, what did they say? You can host a fundraising event. You can, all these different things you could do. Okay? The candidates also do something that is, in some ways, is amazing. And I think we can thank or blame Barack Obama for this. It used to be that, if you were supporting a candidate, they would give you, a yard sign or, a campaign button to show your support. And we used to think it was natural that they would give them to you because, after all, you're showing your support for them. Shouldn't they give you the button at least? Barack Obama figured out he could actually get people to buy this stuff, okay? Which meant he didn't have to pay for it and could even make money on it. So now both presidential candidates do this, okay? They even sometimes have Hillary Clinton has some very fancy designers who've made up high-priced T-shirts and other things, or even a pocketbook or bag for women they can carry, and you can buy Donald Trump's "Make America Great Again" baseball hats. Okay. Okay. Mobile phone apps simply act a lot like the web page. Again, Hillary Clinton's is much better. Donald Trump's just sort of got in the other day, and in some ways you can see a little bit more about the candidates from this as well. Everything with Donald Trump has a big Donald Trump on it, okay? Donald Trump is about Donald Trump, okay? There's no fading into the background for him, okay? Hillary Clinton has all these different things you can do for her, and they try and make it sort of, you know how on some game apps, maybe Angry Birds or something, you want to open up find all the secret eggs or get all the gold coins or whatever it is. They try and make it so see, you want to become a really good volunteer and get your percentage up to 100% or whatever. Okay. We have a lot of, beyond internet memes, we have a lot of parodies. Parody simply means in English to make fun of. Okay, a big one this year has been, there's a group called Songify the News. Okay? And what they've done is they take the actual words of candidates and then they sort of put them to music, and then they take the candidates' pictures and they put them in videos. Okay, so here's one where they have Hillary Clinton playing guitar with Bernie Sanders, and they have the Bernie Sanders guy going, he's at a dance club going and Bernie Sanders looks like an even worse dancer than me. But, and the song is about how they need to fight the tweets of Donald Trump. And here we have Donald Trump was at a debate, and all the other Republicans are getting ignored as he dances around and talks about, "I'm the greatest, I love Mexicans." Okay. Okay. We also have comedy shows are really huge in the US when it comes to politics increasingly. In particular, Saturday Night Live. Now, Saturday Night Live is on every Saturday night at 11:30, and it's live. And they often do what they call a cold open, which means they start with a political skit even before they announce, hey, this is a show. Okay, they begin they pretend they're at a news event, or they've caught Hillary Clinton at a bar talking to the bartender, and so this woman does the Hillary Clinton parody and has really got kind of Hillary down, and is very good at mocking sort of the things about her that maybe people don't like. I think the most acid line she came up with was, "I really think you're going to like the Hillary Clinton my team and I have put together for you tonight." Okay, which makes fun of the fact that a lot of people think Hillary's fake and she's not very, that she's always kind of trying to figure out what people want. Okay, here this guy does Donald Trump, and I confess a lot of comedians think it's hard to make fun of Donald Trump because he's too ridiculous in person. But, you know, he does his sort of over-the-top, you know, I'm amazing, and of course his hair is very important. And, you know, they often have him saying sort of more and more outrageous things. And they had fun making fun of sort of Chris Christie, who's kind of a governor who's been cast kind of as his lapdog, as like, you know, Trump sort of making fun of him. Okay. Democrats, well, Republicans seem to dominate talk radio. Democrats seem to dominate comedy shows. Interestingly, many of our biggest comedians these days are from other countries, including Trevor Noah from South Africa is now the host of The Daily Show. John Oliver from the UK hosts Last Week Tonight. And Samantha Bee is now the first woman to have a major one. And to be honest, I think she's currently the best one. Her show is called Full Frontal, and she's very funny and very sharp. She used to be on The Daily Show, and now she started her own show, and it's they're all very good, but I would say currently she's the best. Okay, so we have lots of these shows, and they're very popular, and a lot of people actually get their news in a way from these shows. Okay, a lot of people, particularly of like your generation, or for that matter, my generation, like I don't really watch the nightly news anymore because there's no point. Okay, and the reason there's no point is because earlier in the day I probably surfed several websites that tell me what's going on. So with all due respect to my fine friend here, I don't need someone to read the news to me at that point because I've already seen it. Okay, or maybe I've heard it on the radio. Okay, or maybe on a 24-hour news channel like Al Jazeera, which you flip it on and you see something. Oh, sorry. See, professors, you can't let them talk, and I will wrap it up. Okay. Where Trump has really shined is his rallies, because they tend to be so aggressive, he gets a lot of attention for them. Okay? And there's also been a lot of attention because there's been protests and even fights at them. Candidates also, a key aspect of manipulating the media is creating media events. And so candidates like to create photogenic things with lots of supporters around them, like Hillary Clinton there. Okay, Hillary Clinton standing around with all these young people. It's always got to be young people, apparently, like old people bad. Okay, young people supporting them. Okay, and I think at that point, I will now wrap it up. It's a real pleasure to get to talk to you about elections in my country here in Egypt, especially with such a distinguished fellow panelists. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I'll try to stick to my 10 minutes, and I wish really we could have heard more from David, because actually we are here to learn more from him. And I read some of his work, and really very impressive, to the point that sometimes I don't feel, and politically speaking, much difference between our views or my opinions, except maybe whether it's better to live in Montgomery, Maryland, or Fairfax County, Virginia. So actually, as someone who is for Maryland, and I think you were mayor of Chevy, is that too?
Yeah.
Wow, it's very interesting to talk to the mayor. So, but really there are so many issues that have been raised, and it might be a good idea to discuss or elaborate a little bit on it before we hear from your questions or comments as well. The first thing actually is, as they say, who lives by the sword dies by the sword, and that could be true on someone like Trump. It is the media also that created Trump, or Trump using the media as the CEO, the businessman, the one who would fire, not maybe hire, as Hillary Clinton sometimes jokes about him, as he's just very good in firing but not in hiring. So it is the guy who is in charge, or the CEO in TV shows that actually made the name, in addition to other things, like he loves to associate with what they call it, Miss Americas, or whatever it is, and sometimes Miss Universe, as his current maybe First Lady. But in any way, so some of the things that the media is weak on is not just something is wrong or going on wrong, and of course David was right in the examples that he gave, that of course where it bleeds, it leads, as they say in the news and the headlines, but actually sometimes on our side or part of the world, sometimes things might be the norm is to go wrong. So if something went right, that would be news in itself. So actually, if someone would tell us that the traffic was great in Cairo, despite this is a regular business day, not holidays or Friday or whatever, it really should be news for itself. So unfortunately, sometimes when things become not the norm, it's the case. The other thing that I had a chance to follow closely U.S. presidential elections, and yes, as our guest speaker mentioned, that what is going to happen on November 8th or on the first Tuesday after Monday, or after first Monday on November every 4 years, or even every 2 years. Maybe every 2 years you have also a new parliament or representative, House of Representatives being re-elected, more than 435 people or around, in addition to governors and 1/3 of the Senate and all of that stuff. So on the elections or general elections, not just the midterm, we're talking about everything in the US, and sometimes even what they call initiatives or proposals. Initiative as in a county or in an area like New Cairo here, people decided that we don't want someone to start mowing their yard before 9 or 10 a.m. in the morning on Saturday or Sunday because we need to go to sleep, or we don't want someone to come and fix his house after 5 p.m. whatever. Sometimes we see that in gated communities, but that's also things that people choose the opportunity of election day to go and do that. So when they go on Tuesday, they are not going just for Trump or Hillary. They are for the governor, for the Senate, for the House, for everything, also for the mayor as well, to be elected or chosen. However, my experience actually covering in particular the presidential elections in 1984 as well as 88 and after that 92, 96, 2000, 2004 in particular, and the main ones that I had more coverage and close to it, both the conventions of both parties in 88 as well as in 2004. In 88, I was covering as a broadcaster in Arabic for the Voice of America, based in Washington, to audience in the Arab world. And at that time, I remember I was so happy when I got an interview with the eldest son of the presidential candidate at that time, who was also a vice president of the U.S., George Herbert Walker Bush, or George Bush the father, in 1988. His son came with his chief of staff or chief of campaign at that time, John Sununu Sr., to attend a gala for Arab Americans. So the guy who came to represent his father was George W. Bush, who became later a governor and a president. And at that time, he was not in politics at all. And I'm giving that example to show that it is not about bias from the media or looking for the negative. So I was eager to have an interview with him on the radio. John Sununu told him why it's a good idea to talk to Arab media or people in the Arab world. And about 4 or 5 minutes I interviewed him in was the last months of the Iran-Iraq war, asking him about the Gulf War. He was saying just same cliche, my dad is going to bring security to the Gulf. Arab-Israeli politics, my dad is going to bring peace to the Middle East. Whatever, anything, the answer was almost, my dad is going to do that. And I ended up maybe finding only 30 seconds as a soundbite in a report I did at that time without anything of use for it. So sometimes we cannot blame the media when you have someone like George W. Bush or Dan Quayle. So it's not about that if it's FDR or Eisenhower or Jimmy Carter made a mistake in a spelling, that would have been something that they would pick on it. Yes, they might pick on it, but they are not going to stay with it. But sometimes it really represents something and glorify that as we do in caricature or cartoon, is that it shows something about the guy, that something really very close to describe the way this guy is acting. So that's why I remember the joke when George Bush, the father, chose his vice president and surprised people during the convention in '88 while we were in New Orleans, that it is Dan Quayle. And the joke was from journalists at that time covering the event is that the Secret Service that's protecting the president has, from now on, they have orders. If something wrong happened to George Bush, the president, please go ahead and shoot Dan Quayle immediately, because of the national security of the country for Dan Quayle to govern or to rule the U.S. So Trump, I believe, is a case in which it's very tough to blame the media for what they are doing with him. Fact-checking as done on daily basis almost with CNN. Yes, there is some kind of a polarization that when you have Fox News on one side and CNN on the other, each one immediately do fact-checking and try and damage control for their favorite guy and against the other one once a speech is finished. That is not the media that we would like. We don't want this kind of polarization that we see in the media, particularly as a result of Fox News itself.
Because they have to go at 2 o'clock.
Yes, yes.
Do you want to give them a chance to
Sure. So very briefly, I would like to mention that in many cases the media is just representing, maybe with some kind of exaggeration, what people are seeing, and people who benefited from the media, like Trump themselves, are the people who are going to pay for it. And the media was not nice with Hillary Clinton or the Clinton family after the Monica Lewinsky affairs, and they did take their share. So it's fair for Trump to take and to reap the result of what he was doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We've had a very good talk and very interesting comments and discussion. So I know that you have to leave, but please, if you have 2 or 3 questions, I certainly would appreciate that. Yes, go ahead.
Media sets the agenda of the election and the debates, what the topic is, and then you went to, they create the controversy, so they decide what is shown, and then again, could we go as far as saying that the media, in a way or other, is undermining the basic value of democracy that the elections were founded upon, in this sense? And another question I have is, related to the first, if this is true, could we in any way provide some form of government intervention that could regulate such bias that would even lead to fake news just to, for one candidate or the other to undermine or to support? In fact, like I come from Tunisia, where what we did was the national television would give a free platform for other nominees that aren't in two big parties to have the opportunity of, just providing the information and introducing their party, because even in America, some parties don't even have that luxury of presenting themselves to the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we have one or two other questions, please? If not, I think these two questions were really very substantive. And no other questions? Okay.
Really are very good questions, and I must say, it's sort of difficult, and different countries handle things in different ways, and I must say Tunisia has been regarded by many in the United States as sort of a model of how to progress towards democracy in a difficult situation where many people disagree. Okay. At the same time, in my country, I think it's fine to provide platforms, because that provides more speech, but what you don't want to do is regulate speech, because when the government starts deciding what you can hear, they start deciding what you can think. And so I tend to think of what Winston Churchill said about democracy, which is that it's the worst system of government except for all the others. Okay, and the way to deal with the problems of free speech is with more free speech.
Okay, please go ahead.
I have a question regarding the...
Can you speak louder, because I think it's being on the mic with that.
Okay, so I have a question regarding the debt ceiling. I know it's outside the scope of your of this meeting, but I've watched some videos. Thank you. Is this one? Okay.
Yes.
So I got the chance to watch some of your videos and regarding the U.S. debt ceiling, and Donald Trump has notoriously advocates for printing more money as a solution to our possible default on our debt. Surprisingly, the only medium that commented was Forbes magazine, and that story kind of died. I think it's really problematic to have such an important issue and not being covered at all by CNN and the likes. I think a big part of it is it's a complex issue to the everyday Joe in America, and talking about racism and talking about white and black, and those sort of things are highlights, and they create a lot of attention. But printing money as a way to not default, I have an issue with Trump and the U.S. government thinking this is a solution. We are all in the hole here, especially in the Middle East, because of the drop in oil prices and the pegging of the dollar and our dependency on imported goods. So if you can give us your thoughts on the debt crisis, and is there ever going to be a ceiling, or will the U.S. forever print money, which we all forever need? And I think it's ridiculous. It has to end at one point. I'd like to see your comments, please. Thank you.
Just very quickly, I think you made a very good analysis of that. It's complex, and most people don't understand about monetary policy, so it's less covered. You know, having said that, the key thing about debt is not sort of how much you have of it, but it's the debt is a share of your gross national product. Okay, and so ours during the recession went up a lot, but now has been declining rapidly. The idea that the U.S., like Donald Trump, should declare bankruptcy and then print more money to solve its problems is the most irresponsible, could possibly be the most irresponsible thing he has said. Because the U.S., just simply speaking from the perspective of as an American, we benefit so much from the dollar being the world reserve currency that And the idea that you would casually mention the full faith and credit of the U.S. economy is something you could just throw away, and we would be not just throwing away our economy, but yours and the rest of the world is just beyond silly. And our Congress, when it debated this issue and also acted irresponsibly, was also the height of foolishness. So, issues like that really should get more attention. I think the racial issues are important, but, issues like what you mentioned really affect us all, and in some ways in a bigger way.
Okay, do you want the last question? Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question. I know both of the candidates have accused the media of bias when they don't like the stories that are coming out. And I was wondering if you had any comment on to what extent continuing to delegitimize contradictory media by saying they have a bias against me is allowing candidates to get away with wildly inaccurate statements and almost throwing facts out. Because if you don't like the facts reported, the easiest thing to do is to say, well, the media is out to get me, and the role that's possibly had in this election.
I think the media is having a problem this year because they don't know how to deal with Donald Trump. Some people say we now live in a post-fact environment, okay? And that facts are no longer important. And in some ways that's almost true in the sense of what Donald Trump supporters care about is the anger and emotion and the values he presents, not whether or not anything he says is true. At the same time, I think there is a rightful criticism over the past few days that's come to light that Hillary Clinton makes some mistakes which well-deserve criticism, but get criticized at extreme length and in far more depth than Donald Trump on a daily basis has frankly often done things that would have killed other presidential campaigns. Like when he criticized Senator John McCain as not being a war hero, I just am amazed he survived that one, but he survived that and many more. So I think it's almost like we've become numb to things being made up. Both sides do play this game. You're absolutely right. It's sort of a means of trying to bully the media, but the media needs to do its job and, both ask tough questions, which they often do, but then also the tough follow-up questions. So like when one of them lies, and they both lie, but frankly Trump a lot more than Clinton, you need to act, you need to follow up and ask the tough question. And I know you all need to go, so before I turn it back to our moderator, I just wanted to say shukran, and I really appreciate such good questions and good tough questions here at AU Cairo, and thank you for welcoming me in your country.
Thank you very much, David. I would like to give the floor to Hafez for one last word, and then we will wrap it up.
Thank you. Maybe that for some of the questions that we have to study more about the role of money in politics or in elections in the US, as in many democracies, in media as well. So maybe regulating or putting more curbs and delimitation on how much money could you spend or big corporations spend for someone like Trump to allow him just to finance his whole campaign by himself. That might be also a problem in itself. Media also, and ownership of media, and to what extent can you give business the right to have this kind of empires, as the case of Fox News and News Corp or others. So these are things that is very complicated. I would, David, that this is the last thing that we would wish for a government to intervene, because a government is not a judicial system to intervene. They are part of the problem, and they are just another party or another one competing. And one of the great work that I hope maybe in the future David would revisit us about redistricting or make a redistricting elective or districts for election in the US, and how both parties manipulate this system, the gerrymandering that Dr.Magda was mentioning before, under a guy who used to be called Jerry, the governor of Mass, I think, Massachusetts. So it's after him, after this guy Jerry. So there are so many things in the politics that is so complicated, and instead of just simplifying things and blame it on the media. Thank you.
So we have had very strong advocates for the media here, and we have had very strong advocates for the election, how it's substantive in the US, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I would like really to thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you.